In this video, we're going to take a look at a blue ink by Iroshizuku Asiatic Dayflower. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description are links to playlists, so if you'd prefer to take a look at a different blue ink, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade where quick goes darker to lighter to darker, brown goes darker to lighter, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it shades fairly nicely as brown goes darker to lighter. Fox goes lighter to darker. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation, and we get it, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Platinum 3776 with a music nib was inked up, used for day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading like the middle of quick looks much lighter, especially next to the word the. 9 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 19 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation, and we only really get to see it, half decent in the extra fine. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we really do see a true blue here. It's very light, working its way up, but bonding as it goes, leaving just a little bit of that blue all the way, even though it gathers at the top. Now the one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes before it's dunked in the water, and we see that line across the bottom shows that this is bonding with the paper fairly well. Now a lot of that ink is still pushing up, meaning not all of it's staying there, but it does mean that there may be a little bit of resistance here. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade. Like in Iroshizuku, it starts darker, gets lighter, gets much darker, lighter again, and darker. Pretty nice. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does shade. Like Fox goes dark to light to dark. Jumps goes light to dark. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade as Jumps goes a little lighter to darker. Quick is a very dark word, especially next to over. 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show good color variation, and I think we're getting that in the writing. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I feel safe using it in a note-taking situation as we can completely recover the information that's there. Now, water did something very interesting in it did very little. I realized that in the second chromatography, a bunch of that ink was still there, but this is still very dark blue. Very surprised with that. The good news is it's only ever taken water to get this out of my pen. Now as we move up, it's also got an interesting red sheen that shows up in the swatch, which is a reason that I don't care for swatches to look at a color of an ink, because I have not seen any of that red sheen show itself in any of the writing. Now, Pen Flush does a lot more than water does. It's really starting to break it down. I think given more than 30 seconds, it could remove it from the page. We see areas that the white of the paper is getting ready to show through. The 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it, but you're not going to need it to get it out of your pen. The next writing sample is done on Leuchtturm 1917 paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade some. If you look at the Kusa, you see it goes darker to lighter to darker. Iroshizuku goes darker to lighter to darker to lighter. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It shades very nicely as quick goes lighter to darker. Brown goes darker to lighter to darker. The is very dark compared to the word over, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a tad bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It still shows spots of shading. The middle of brown is a little bit lighter than the ends of brown. Over starts slightly lighter than it ends, 8 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both does show some color variation. It's better in the extra fine than it is in the medium, and a smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Iroshizuku's Asiatic Dayflower has a viscosity of 2.6, making it normal. If you're interested in how all that viscosity stuff is done, there's a link to that video down in the description. The next writing sample is done on 28-pound premium copy paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. I don't count the spot where the scrubby comes through. The medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the medium, maybe a tad bit lighter, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows some color variation, though it's really not coming through in the writing, and the smear test you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Iroshizuku's Asiatic Dayflower has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a fast drying ink. The last writing sample is done on crowd favorite 20-pound copy paper. Now we have a ton of spots that are bleeding in very heavy, but not all the way through. It does mean that you can't use the back of the page because you risk ruining both sides of your notes, but it does not ruin the page underneath. The medium has minor feathering in the Kusa. Not too bad, not something that would stop you from using this paper. It's got no spread, it's got minor spread. It's going from a medium to between a medium and a broad. No halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the medium. It has no feathering here. It does have minor spread to about a fine, but it's pretty uniform in its spreading. It actually looks like I'm just writing with a fine. No halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows a little bit of color variation, but we're not getting it in the writing. In a smear test, you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Iroshizuku's Asiatic Dayflower, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a nice pink by Sailor, Mother Pink. Down in the description are links to different color playlists, so if you'd prefer a different complement, you can find one there. So what do I think of Iroshizuku's Asiatic Dayflower? This is a good shading blue that travels the range from dark to light. It does it very gently all the time. The swatch lies and shows a much darker blue than the majority of the writing. Another example of how the writing sample gives the best view of an ink. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? I really do think a medium flow medium really puts down some of the best tone and helps bring out some of the shading that this ink has. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video we're going to take a look at Ackerman's No. 5 Shocking Blue.